Good evening. I wanted to take a moment to thank our regular listeners and welcome anybody new to the channel. Drop a comment below, click all the buttons, and get tucked in for 19 first-hand ghostly encounters here at Paranormal M. The Crying Girl. We moved into a house when I was 10-ish years old. There was nothing special about the house, but I got a room in the basement which was way bigger than my old room, so I was thrilled. That didn't last long. The very first night we slept there, come bedtime, I headed to my room. Soon as I got to the stairs, I instantly regretted picking that room. It was dark and secluded, and it freaked me out at night. I made my way downstairs and climbed into bed. I fall asleep and I wake up at 2 to 3 a.m. to hear a girl sobbing. It scared me badly, but it was coming from the side of the room the door was on, so I dare not make a run for it. The crying goes on for 5 to 10 minutes and then slowly winds down. I finally calm myself and go back to sleep. This happens every single night for months. I didn't want to tell my parents, so I asked my brother to sleep in the room with me. Every time he slept in my room, not a sound would be heard. It's frustrating, but weird enough, I finally got used to it. Sometimes I would even wake up, but I know deep down it was occurring even while I was asleep. I then a few months later started dreaming of a girl in a wedding dress, but it looks like she was in a car accident. She was disfigured and scary as hell to me. She would always be sitting holding something, but in the dream I was too scared to look. This dream also kept reoccurring for quite some time until the sound and dream were every night events. This goes on and on and on, and as time passes, it bothers me less and less and less. Then one night I wake up and hear the same sobbing. I roll over and try to go back to sleep. But before I can, I notice the cry starting to switch. It slowly goes from crying to a deranged laughter. This scares me badly for some reason. I panic, I get up and run toward the door, even though it's toward the sound. I get to the door and the sound is right next to me. I don't know if the door was locked or if I was just too panicked, but I couldn't get it open. Started screaming and screaming. I hear footsteps of my parents running upstairs to get to the stairs. I hear them running down the stairs, and I'm in complete panic. The door starts shaking like they're trying to open it. As this is happening, I feel like somebody's grabbing my arm and I lose my shit. I'm ripping at the door to try to get it open with my parents on the other side. I get it to finally open, expecting my dad on the other side, but nobody is there. The door is open, so now I run upstairs, screaming and crying. Now I'm upstairs and my parents hear me. They come out of their bedroom. I tell them everything, and they just kind of looked lost. I told them I would never go back down there again. They let me start sleeping in the living room. And I never heard it again, and I never went back downstairs. Months later we moved, and I kind of got over it. But that was one of the scariest moments of my childhood. Girl on the River. When I was around 13, me and my dad went on a canoe trip. It took 3 days, but it's a pretty calm river and quite beautiful. The first day was amazing and fun all the way around. The sun and water and nature. It was an amazing time. Night came, we took up shelter on a beach for the night. As we sit by the campfire, I see the water in the river splashing. I remember it almost rapidless and calm. I tell my dad and he looks and says it's probably some fish. Thought it was multiple monster fish, if so. We finish up and retire to the tents. In the middle of the night, I wake up to reposition, and I swear I hear a girl and a guy talking. It's faint, but nobody should even be close. It's not that loud, so I shrug it off and go back to sleep. Next morning we head out again. It's a great day, and I swim and relax on the beaches. Not a person around but Dad. We eat lunch at the beach and continue down the river, and as it hits about 4 to 5 p.m., my dad tells me we need to consider finding a good stopping point. Minutes later, I notice a girl on the bank in a tree, but she's like at the top, and the tree is huge. Freaks me out, because we're in the middle of nowhere, and who sits in a tree 60 feet up just chilling in this remote area? Night comes, and the same stuff occurs, and we eat and start a fire. It's about 10 p.m. We're going to turn in. I hear cracking sticks off at the wood's edge. I glance over and it's the same girl from the tree. I instantly freak out and tell my dad to look, but by the time he looks, she's back in the tree line. I'm scared, so I ask to sleep in his tent. He agrees, seeing how spooked I am. Night goes by uneventful. Besides the constant limbs cracking, which was more than usual, maybe I was just uneasy. The final morning arrives and we load up to leave, and I realize the fire is smoldering. I soaked it with buckets of water, and it appears there's more wood in it. This kind of sketches me out more, but last day, let's go. We load up, start going down the final 8-hour canoe. The afternoon was fun doing the same stuff. Got to 2 hours till load off. I'm checking out the scenery and my heart drops. On the beach, in full view, is the same girl, beaten and bloodied up. Very rough looking. I make eye contact as we pass by. My dad sees her clear as day at this point. He starts paddling faster. We get about 10 to 15 feet ahead, and she screams the scariest scream I've ever heard. She starts running down the bank beside the river, and she's like unreasonably fast. We're paddling hard, and I'm screaming, but we can't gain much ground even with the current. We get even with her again, and she stops running. We keep paddling like our life was invested, and as I look back to her, she stopped on the bank, and she slowly starts walking into the water without reaction until she's under. We paddled fast as humanly possible, and the last 2 hours took like 30 minutes. I don't know if it was crazy or just a ghost, or I don't know. Never went back since, though. This is one of the many events that have happened over the course of my life. I moved into my current home about 4 years ago in a decent neighborhood. My house happens to be near the junction of 2 rivers, and apparently heavily contested with the Native Americans during the expansion of the nation westward. Present day, the river is relatively swift and gets very high and moving after it rains. Back in the time of expansion west, it was probably a serious obstacle, as it and several other rivers populate this area. After moving in, I noticed that I would go through short periods where I would get very overprotective of my children, to the point of me blowing up and yelling at them whenever they did anything that might be misconstrued as dangerous. They're 6-year-old twins and are ADHD, so they can be pretty damn nuts when wound up. After freaking out and yelling, I would get these very intense feelings of loss, sadness, and of failure, and an overwhelming urge to be extremely vigilant, and a strange urge to teach my kids to swim. So, after settling in a few weeks, I got curious about the attic entrance in my room, which is above your head as you walk into the room. So I brought a tall stool to stand on, opened the hatch, it's a trapdoor, a square piece of wood over the entrance. I put it aside on the floor. As I stood and began to break the plane of door insulation, it just rained down into my eyes. For whatever reason, after cleaning my eyes, I just put the hatch back and went about my business until I decided to take a nap a bit later, maybe 3 p.m. During my nap, I dreamt about walking down the hallway of my house, which seemed to now be a hotel of some type. As I got to my room, I'm standing in the doorway of my room, looking at the attic entrance, and the coat closet opens up, and a woman takes a step out and follows my gaze up to the attic entrance, and back to me, and she says, "That's where the big one lives." About that time, the attic hatch slides out of the way. The woman goes back into the closet, and I'm picked up by what feels like a large hand placed against the wall. Never saw anything in my dream, but the message I remember thinking in my dream was, "I can hurt you." After that, I was let down on the floor. So after I wake up, I walk around the rest of the day wondering what the fuck. So, that evening I go to bed at whatever time, and go to sleep. For whatever reason, I woke up just after 3 a.m., checked my watch afterwards, and at the exact moment I opened my eyes, one of my son's large dinosaur toys, about 2 feet from my face, is roaring. How the toy got there is weird as fuck because my kids were with their mom that weekend and the toy wasn't there when I went to bed. After the dinosaur stopped with its roaring, I decided the best course of action was to be a tough guy and say, "Yeah, right, motherfucker." And I rolled facing the wall and went back to sleep. I can share many more if anyone's interested. Instances like this have happened to both my kids and every guest that stayed in my home. I've had a ghost following me home from a store, and it's been 7 years of their shenanigans. I used to work in a store that everyone claimed was haunted. I was told it was either a woman or a drag queen, because my coworkers would hear heels clicking around the store at night. I didn't believe any of it, even when I closed up shop and opened the next morning, and the pet beds had all been neatly lined up on the ground, down the whole aisle, and yet the alarm was never turned off or went off because of the motion. I also came in one morning to see a half-eaten candy bar on the floor, one that we didn't sell. I laughed it off, swearing my coworkers were just messing with me. Well, one night I was closing up. I had already walked the entire store and was with another coworker. We heard a noise of metal scraping the floor. We wanted to see if anybody had snuck around while we were on our walkthrough. It was a very small store, 4 or 5 aisles at most. Nothing. So I went back to the closing of paperwork and we locked up. The next night we heard the heel clicks of someone coming down the hallway toward our back room. I got up to confront whoever it was, but no one was there. My cashier was absolutely horrified, wanting to stay with me instead of doing her closing duties alone in the store. Well, I left that job, but I noticed some weird stuff starting to happen at my house. My roommate would ask me why I moved certain things, and I would tell him I never did, and vice versa. At one point we heard a child's toy, his kid, under our couch playing music. We moved the couch, went to take the batteries out, but there weren't any in there. We also heard heel clicks clicking around the apartment throughout the day and the next night too. He assumed ghost. Kinda believed it after that. I moved from there to a new place out of town with my newlywed husband, not thinking about the ghost until stuff started falling off tables and shelves, and once again, I could hear heels clicking around my apartment. The problem was, we had carpet everywhere, and cheap plastic-like floors that never made clicks when I walked on it with heels. Now I've moved back to my hometown to a nice apartment, but this morning I caught my shoes moving on my door camera. It was like someone pivoted them completely. Their placement together hadn't changed, but the angle. We hadn't been over there. The motion video also didn't show actual motion, just that my shoes were suddenly not in the same place anymore. This past weekend, we were relaxing on the couch when suddenly something in our pantry was banging around. We assumed the cat must have been locked in there by mistake. but the cat came running into the kitchen to see what the sound was. We opened the pantry and saw 2 cans of nearly expired manwich which had fallen on the ground. But they weren't the only in the upright shelf before, so also behind a lot of other cans too that seemed untouched. Also, they were on the bottom shelf, so it should have made so much banging on the way down. I don't know if at this point I should get rid of the ghost because the cans were about to expire. I was forced to see it when I picked them up. So maybe it was telling me that. Plus, my shoes I noticed had a bad odor to them, which I'd never known if they hadn't been moved, since I don't wear that pair often enough. The ghost is just being aggressively friendly, and I don't want to be rude. The Dark Thing. When I, a female 33, was 20 years old, not too long after the 2007 housing crash, my family and I moved into a house in Martins Ferry, Ohio. It previously was a duplex that was converted into one large house. It had 2 floors, 6 bedrooms, 4 on the second floor, 2 on the ground floor, 1 bathroom next to my bedroom, and a very short basement. I couldn't stand up straight in it, and I'm 5'9". I lived there with my 2 older brothers, A and E, 22 and 21, and little sister H, 13. Our rooms were on the second floor, as well as my mother, 52, and stepfather, 45. I also have an older sister, D, 27. I didn't come from a great home life, and eventually my stepfather was put in jail for DUIs and driving without a license. Everything was fine when we moved in, at least. We all had previously experienced paranormal activity in other homes that we lived in. This wasn't something unusual or frightening, because we lived in an oldish city. Other than seeing, hearing, and smelling some weird things, nothing was outstandingly frightening. Dee lived with her husband at the time, along with their 2 children. Her husband was financially abusive, and was also an addict who got Dee addicted as well. One day, Dee called me crying because her husband had spent all their money on drugs, left her car on empty, and had left her alone at home with the children, and no food to eat. I spoke with my mother, and we came up with a game plan to get my sister out. I advised her to pack everything up that she could fit in her car, pack up the kids, and meet me at the gas station. She lived a short 20-minute drive away across the river. I met her at the gas station, and while I filled her can with gas, I hugged her as she cried. I bought her a pack of smokes, and we both drove back to the house. But what we didn't know was that Dee was just starting to the worst few years of her addiction. Due to all of the negative energy, something dark had attached to her. The first thing I remember was how dreary the house felt after she had moved in. She eventually was fired from her job as a nurse, because she'd been caught stealing meds from her patients. She decided to get back with her husband, and he moved in because he couldn't afford their housing payments due to spending all of his money on drugs. And she also had a boyfriend she was cheating on him with. It was a very tumultuous time because Dee is the type of person who thinks all other women are out to get her and steal her man. She assumed that I was trying to sleep with her husband because I tried to be civil around him. I was engaged to someone else at the time. After a day full of my sister trying to physically attack me, this is when the dark thing started to materialize. At night, I'd be in my bed. I'd feel like something was watching me. Anytime I was doing schoolwork, it felt like someone was standing behind me while I sat at my desk in my bedroom. It evolved into things in my room being moved around when no one else was able to get into my room. Then, my blankets would be pulled off of me in my sleep. Eventually, I started hearing something walking around my room at night. Then the scratches started appearing. I would wake up with random scratches on my legs and on my back where I couldn't reach them. One night I was grabbed by my leg, ripped off of my bed by something I wasn't able to see. I'm not a small woman by any means, so it would take someone quite strong to yank me that hard and that fast off my bed in dead weight of deep sleep. Another terrifying night, I heard it walking around the hallway outside my bedroom. I lit some sage to cleanse my room and started chanting a protection spell over and over for nearly half an hour. My fiancé, Jay, 19 at the time, called me extremely upset, telling me something was in the house outside his room growling, and he felt like it was going to be maybe attacking him if he'd left his room. The next day I went over to his house. He lived in the town I grew up in where my sister and her whole family lived before he moved into this new house. There were gouged scratches into the wooden door from where it had been waiting. I asked him if it had left anything, or if he had left anything at his house within the last few days. And I looked around and I saw my own watch on the windowsill by his bed. Okay, this is the best title so far. There very well might be an evil chicken ghost in my mom's house. Please help. A few months ago, one of my mom's neighbor's chickens started coming into her yard to hang out. At first, they liked the chicken, because why not? A free chicken. Duh. Anyway, there was an instance when the chicken had become aggressive toward my mom's boyfriend, tried to peck him. So he threw it over the dance back into her neighbor's yard. It must be a chicken term. It came back the next day. The trouble began very recently. My mom's dog attacked and severely wounded the chicken. My mom panicked and called a friend who then mercy killed, in air quotes, the chicken in the bathroom. Since that happened, strange things have been happening. And I could tell their mood has not been the best, and they've told me that their animals started acting different. I went to the house and prayed to God to have any negative energy removed from the house. When I got home, I had a fresh cut on my index finger. Oddly enough, it looks like a chicken pecked my finger. Later, after noticing that, my brother called me. He and his girlfriend had been taking care of the animals while my mom and her boyfriend were out of town. He explained to me that he was putting his kid's car seat in, and while he was gone, his girlfriend heard him talking to the dog that attacked the chicken. Random flashing red lights. I live in a 2-story house, a bit far from the city. It's surrounded by valleys and houses like mine. Let's say I live in a quiet and secluded place. For the last 3 days, I'm experiencing red lights in my vision. The first time I saw the red flash from outside. I have a small terrace on the second floor, and I saw the light outside from the empty valley. It was distant and lasted for about a second, quickly disappearing completely. It was a single flash of red light. I blamed it on my sleep schedule, and I ignored it. The second time I saw it in the bathroom, the lights were dimly lit, and I was getting ready to take a shower when I saw the same red flash, but this time closer near the sink. It didn't emit from anything, it just flashed for a moment. It was weird, since it didn't come from anywhere, but still, I ignored it. The third time, however, I saw it right in front of me, in my room. It flashed near a cabinet, which is in front of my bed. I was laying on my bed and it flashed like before. That time, I got quite concerned and didn't blame my eyes or my sleep schedule. I decided to post about it. I did my research, but there is nothing. It all happened at night 3 days in a row. I don't know what to blame anymore, so if anybody had such an experience, please tell me, what does that red flashing light mean? Anything supernatural? Or are my eyes joking with me? I have no idea. Need advice. My property is haunted. Last week, my husband and I invited our friends to spend a weekend in our country house. It was quite late, around 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. We were chilling around the fire pit. The whole property is surrounded by a white fence. There aren't many trees and several light sources, so pretty much everything is visible. My husband goes, "Huh?" and gets up to check something in the corner that we're facing. When he gets back, I ask what's wrong, and he says he's probably just quote-unquote seeing things. Okay, so I brush it off. As we're getting ready to go to bed, he goes to turn off the lights in the patio. He comes back to say that he saw something yet again. I start questioning him, and he says that his eyes are playing tricks on him. We all kind of laugh it off. Now, I understand he didn't want to scare me. The next day, we sit by the fire pit again, and our friend says, "Ha, now it's me who's seeing things." What he saw was an orb moving from our patio to the sauna, and then disappearing behind it, maybe about 2 meters. The first one was the size of a basketball, and then another one the size of a tennis ball. He's a 100% skeptic, so he didn't feel scared at all, explaining it all by light hitting weird angles. The same night I saw a blue light, almost like a light bulb, in the same direction but in a different corner of the sauna building. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds, trying to understand what it was, and then it disappeared almost as if someone turned it off. I'm sure there's no light sources there, let alone blue ones. When we left that house and headed home, I finally made my husband say what he had seen. Turns out, the first one was a black human figure moving next to the patio, so he went to check on it. But it was the second one that gave my goosebumps. As he was turning off the light in the patio, which is covered in mosquito nets, for a split second he saw a human face and hands pressing against the net. He went on to say it wasn't the only experience that he'd had there. He had already seen dark figures a number of times, all in that same area. A little background on this property. Due to a family issue, we didn't visit the place for 12 years, so it was basically abandoned. I don't know about anyone dying there or anything of that kind. The atmosphere there doesn't feel scary or heavy. Last year, my husband and I started visiting and renovating it. I don't know if it's important, I hope not, but this year we're finally getting to, cleaning and using the sauna. It was used for storage space before. We found a lot of trash underneath its foundation, bottles and buckets. The creepiest thing was a bag full of human hair. I felt really uneasy when we found it. Maybe it's a stretch, but it was really weird. So maybe there's a connection since we see strange things in this particular area. Or maybe there's no connection at all, but additionally, we all see different things. So I don't even know how to describe what we're all experiencing properly. Anyway, my question is, what should I do? Maybe use some sage? Or any other way of cleansing the place? Or should I just do nothing as it doesn't feel evil or threatening? I want to spend time there without thinking about anything creepy. I need to share this ghost story with you. My girlfriend and I went to her sister's a few days ago. We were invited as guests in a family meeting. We had a great time, and I was questioning a few things, and one of them was about a cemetery, about 100 feet, or 30 meters approximately away from the house. I cracked 1 or 2 jokes about ghosts, but the atmosphere didn't follow my vibe. Girlfriend told me that, for a long time she was seeing ghosts in that house, and her sister told me she's seen it too. This is how their story goes, and it's really interesting. 15 to 20 years ago, my girlfriend was like 10. Her sister was in her early 20s. Sister was living 2 blocks from the main house, near a cemetery. It was her father's old house. As the girlfriend had bad times as a kid in the main house, she was often escaping to her sister's for a sleepover. And over some time, they were sleeping together in the same bed when she was seeing a real woman in white with white-haired young face sitting just a few feet away on a chair and looking at her. After a few nights, she asked her sister, "What is that in the chair?" Sister was petrified with the question because she was seeing the same woman for months, maybe even years, often in that same chair. Imagine she was ignoring it, God knows how. They were speaking to me in one breath, how women looked like, and the details were absolutely the same and incredibly detailed at that. The ghost didn't bother my sister, but it did bother my girlfriend. She was sitting on her back when she was sleeping face down. We were sleeping on our chests, and sister literally kicked my girlfriend out of bed to turn on the lights. The ghost just disappeared. I don't remember why the ghost stopped to show himself daily, but for years it was gone. My girlfriend already went out of the house, but then the sister seen it again, ignored it, never talked about it. When sister was 32, she was with an old neighbor going through pictures. And in those pictures, they saw a ghost from the chair. She literally started crying and shaking, and believe me, she's a strong woman. Her question was, "Who's that received incredible answer?" "That is the first wife of your dad that fell from the balcony where you sleep now, when house was in construction and she was pregnant, buried on cemetery near house. She hit with head leftover cement. Her dad never told her about death of his first wife. He had 3 in parentheses. Sis went to church, asked what to do. They instructed her to light up candle on grave. She did as told, and that was end of ghost. I usually never believe in ghost stories, but witnessing 2 people that I know talking about me about the same thing simultaneously changed my mind." Scent of souls. What causes the distinct sense in patients as they approach the end of life? In the intensive care unit, they dubbed me a witch, a label that stuck since my days working in the ambulance. What began as a heavy intuition transformed into something more profound when I stepped into the department and sensed the unmistakable odors of death. Each person carried a unique scent of death, from the pleasant aroma of freshly cut grass or wildflowers to the repulsive, earthly, rotten stench. During every shift upon entering the department, the smell guided me to a specific patient, and the time of death seemed to materialize in my mind. Understandably, many colleagues distanced themselves from me. Imagine being told, "Get ready, this person's going to pass away at 5 in the morning." That's the way it unfolded. The strangest part, though, was that a person without a fixed residence, commonly referred to as homeless, could emanate the fragrance of lily flowers. On the other hand, someone who appeared well-groomed might exude the unpleasant odors of rotten potatoes or public toilet. For instances where we managed to extend a person's life temporarily and they could communicate, I discovered that the homeless person with the floral scent was often a wonderful spiritual individual. Meanwhile, those emitting the stench of decay turned out to be unpleasant and harmful. How could I explain this mysterious connection between scent and character? Collecting mystical moments. Real stories of the unexplained. Story 1. The Surprising Grandma. So here's a crazy story. At 37, I unexpectedly became a grandma. Before this, for about a month, I kept having this dream where a little girl around 3 years old would run around me. She'd climb into my knees or ask to be held. I was like, what's going on? Am I going to have a baby? I mean, I was still in the baby-making age range. The girl in my dream was cute, chubby with blonde hair and black eyes. Then I find out my 16-year-old daughter is pregnant. Family meeting time. Should we keep the baby or not? Education and all that. Everybody wanted an abortion, but I said, no way, we're having this baby. I saw her in my dreams. Fast forward, my granddaughter is now 13, blonde with black eyes, just like in my dream. My daughter got her degree and it all worked out. Story 2. The Confused Shopkeeper. Last week I had this weird experience at the store. My mom and I go there every week for treats. I went alone this time, and the cashier smiled and asked, "The usual?" I said, "Yeah." And then she gave me the wrong stuff. I told her what we usually get, and she said, "But you always buy this." I was like, "No, you must be mixing us up with someone else." She insisted, "Can't mistake you. You always come with your mom to get this." We stared at each other for a bit. I didn't argue, and I bought what she gave me. It hit me later. Maybe the Mandela effect kicked in. Something similar happened with my older son. We were reminiscing about the past, and it turns out we remember the same event differently at crucial moments. Back then, I thought it was just childhood memories fading. But the cashier incident, I'm speechless. Story 3. Dreaming the Future Kids. A long time ago, I dreamt I visited my cousin with a baby boy in my arms, breastfeeding him. At the time, my cousin had a month and a 2-year-old girl. Oh, a month or 2-year-old girl. Fast forward 2 years. I had a son and visited my cousin with my baby boy, just like in my dream. Another dream had me walking with a girl with 2 ponytails, realizing she was my daughter. Now I have a daughter with 2 ponytails, just like in my dream. She was born 12 years after my son. Story 4. The Identity Crisis After the Accident. I woke up in the ICU after a car accident, and my second thought was about who I am, whether I'm a man or a woman and what my name is. My concern was for my daughter and husband, who were with me in the car. I thought, this is it, the end. Even mentally, it was scary to articulate. Another woman younger than me came to the same ICU after a similar accident, and her husband died on the spot. The child survived, but in critical condition. I don't know how, but my daughter only had a minor concussion, not even scratches. My husband was physically fine, just lost his memory. While I was in the ICU, I had intense deja vu moments, knowing what would happen in a room 10 minutes before it did, who would say what and who would do what. Paranormal Activity. Advice for Haunted Room. I recently moved into a new room. Things have been unexpectedly moving and strange knocking on my door. I live in the barracks, so at first I thought it was my buddies. Eventually I approached my buddies and told them to stop knocking on my door at midnight so I can sleep. They assured me they weren't knocking, but I didn't believe them. A week ago, while I was asleep in the middle of the night, I heard my tough box lids being thrown on the floor. I woke up in a panic due to the loud noise. Turned on my lamp, saw 2 lids scattered on my floor. My first instinct was that they had slid off, but upon further thought, there was no way they could have slid across 2 other sides of the room. I started telling my friends that I think my room is haunted. They just laughed like usual. I began asking other people about my room, and one individual told me stories about the previous occupant, complaining about furniture being moved around and knocking on the walls and items being thrown. This information started freaking me out even more. Despite my fears, I continued to sleep in the room until the weekend. On Saturday, I left to stay over at my girlfriend's house. When I returned the next day, my room was a mess. My coffee cup was thrown on the ground. Tide Pods were scattered on the floor, and my tough box lids were once again thrown on the floor. I immediately called my friends, and we all went inside. After 10 minutes, we heard knocking on the wall. At this point, I got mad and cursed and taunted whatever was causing this disturbance. A few minutes later, I threw my pre-workout on the ground, knocked 5 times on that wall. That's when me and my other 4 friends ran out of my room. I then decided to sleep in my buddy's room. Fast forward to today. Haven't been to my room in the last 3 days because we were out in the field. When I entered my room, I found my tough box lids thrown on the floor again. Both of my chairs had been moved, with one facing my bed. My coffee cup was laid on my bed. My pictures of me and my friends were moved to the top of my trash can, and a rock was placed in the center of the chair facing my bed. To add to the strangeness, the wall it knocks on is now cracked. I'm at a loss for what to do in this situation. An experience I want some insight on. So I've experienced one of these situations before, but it hasn't happened in years. I'm sitting on a bed in a rehab facility visiting my grandmother. My aunt is also present. I'm reading an article on my phone as 2 people walk in. So I do the polite thing, sit up so they can sit down. However, I put my phone away and I continue reading the article. Or rather, I don't. As I'm reading the article, I'm noticing all the active listening comments going on, like, yeah, oh no, that's good, etc. I start randomly listening to the conversation as I'm reading. Not knowing what is being spoken about, I would ask myself, is she talking about her daughter? And I'd notice someone would make an active listening comment like, yeah, right after I had asked myself the question. And then a sentence or 2 later, the lady said, yeah, my daughter and me. I tuned back out. And now another story. No clue who's being talked about. I ask myself, is it her brother? I hear a comment of, no, in disbelief. Then I ask myself, is it her father? Must be him in response to her next few sentences. I hear, yeah. Then a few sentences later, she says, my father. Anyways, this keeps happening. I tune in and out, asking myself questions about the topic or the conversation, and I hear a yes or no, just random listening comment that ends up being a correct answer to my question right after I ask myself. I start thinking, oh, this isn't real. You're imagining things. Or the guy says, listening comment, oh, you shouldn't do that. Then I convince myself it's in my head. I proceed to ask myself, was that in my head, or is this reality? I hear a good chance of it not being in your head, guy replying to my aunt. Then as the lady's talking, I think so, this is reality? I hear a, yes it is. My aunt replying to the lady. I start internally freaking out as everything goes quiet. Then as I don't think I can handle this. The lady goes, well, all right, I think we've taken enough of y'all's time, and they leave. Has anybody experienced something similar? What do you think was really happening? Was I relating the comments I knew weren't in reply to myself and having a confirmation bias? If it was confirmation bias, then how come I don't remember one instance of the comments being wrong? The next time I experience a similar moment, what are some things I can do to test the validity of the experience in a way that would definitely disprove or prove the reality of it? If something like this was happening to you, would you want it to be proven as a real thing happening? I think it's my perception being altered and trying to relate unrelated things, but I can't make sense of how it's so accurate, at least when it happens, and how it always stops when I get uncomfortable with it. Anyways, I hope this made sense, and I can't wait to hear from the Reddit hive mind. Hopefully someone can give me an explanation, theory, or can relate and share your own similar experiences. I hear my boyfriend's voice walking up the stairs, but he wasn't home. My boyfriend said I could post this here to get it off my chest. See if y'all can help me figure out what happened. So a couple of years ago, my boyfriend and I downloaded Life 360 so we could know the exact location of each other's in case we needed to call the police to each other's locations. I had a rough living situation. I moved in with my boyfriend and his mom right after I turned 18 to their apartment they lived in since my boyfriend was a kid. Well, about 2 months into me living there, my boyfriend's mom was taking him to work. I got a notification that he left. Well, since I would be home alone for an hour, I would run myself a bubble bath to relax. A little bit after, I heard my boyfriend's footsteps coming up the stairs. He was the only one out of the three of us to wear heavy boots, so his footsteps were very distinct. Then I hear his voice call out to me, while still walking up the steps. "Baby, I'm home." I was really confused because he had just left. There was no way he could be home already. Picked up my phone to see if he had texted me. Maybe work was called off. But as I unlocked my phone, I got a notification that he had just pulled into work. I started freaking out and slowly getting out of the tub, wrap a towel around me, trying to listen out for whoever must have broken in. The footsteps start again, and my boyfriend's voice calls out again, "Baby." The footsteps come right to the bathroom door and stop. I stand there for God knows how long until I just rip the door open expecting the worst. The hallway was empty. Checked all 3 rooms upstairs. They were empty too. Checked downstairs, but no one was there and all the doors and windows were locked. We moved out a couple of months later, and whatever mimicked my boyfriend's voice and footsteps followed us to our new place and mimicked my voice to my boyfriend. More crazy experiences I've had that may connect to my last post. I've got a few more stories to tell. My boyfriend and I moved out of the apartment and into a trailer, and everything was quiet for a while, which we were extremely thankful for. After some time passed, we started seeing a tall, inky black shadow figure that was so too tall to stand upright completely. We would see a black mass shoot out of our bathroom door that was about a foot away from our bedroom, and it would disappear into the wall across the hall. We would hear weird whisperings that we couldn't explain. We just ignored it as best we could, hoping that it would just go away. Stopped for a while again, at least for me it did. Fast forward a couple of months. I was in a horrible dark place mentally. It started again with me at work. I would feel kid-sized hands on my thigh. I would hear a young kid's voice calling my name and asking where I was all throughout my shift. One day my manager asked me to check to see if the door that leads outside from the stairwell was shut. I'm going to try my best to describe the layout of the stairwell, so bear with me. So when you walk in and to your right, there's a deep recess under the stairs for storage that's typically pretty well lit. Then the stairs start, and standing at the bottom, you can look up and see the handrails going up all the way to the top. If you walk past the stairs, there's a narrow walkway where outside is. This was my first time going in, so I looked around to find the door my manager was talking about. When I looked to where the storage recess was, I saw this sickly white skin and bony thing crouched into the corner looking at me. Anyway, I saw this sickly white skin and bony thing crouched into the corner looking at me. It had these long bony fingers and hands that looked almost as if it were its feet. I ran to the end of the room and found the door, so I slammed the door shut and turned around to run back out the way I came. As I ran past the stairs, I stupidly thought to look up. When I did, I saw the thing from the storage hole crouching on the railing about 7 stories up, jump down to the second floor railing. Ran out of the room and down the hall outside. Told my manager that I don't want to be in the laundry room for a while because it was right across the hall to that room. I did have to go in there again a couple days later, but there was so much more light in there than the last time. But when I asked my coworkers that use those stairs often, they said it's always super bright in there. I was telling my boyfriend about it a few days later, but he cut me off before I could describe the thing I saw, and said he's been seeing the same thing that I saw at our trailer, watching him from behind corners of walls. We decided to ignore it the best we could, stopped with him, but it got worse with me. I won't go into that now. So I may post the other experiences that made my boyfriend and I leave our place for a few hours because it got so bad. But fast forward about 6 months. I was unemployed, so I was home alone during the day while the boyfriend was at work. I started seeing black masses watching me behind corners, getting closer to me on my bed every day, and I would hear voices in the trailer all day. But I kept it to myself because I thought I was losing it. Well, there was one day I had had enough, because I saw it looking at me from the corner of the open bathroom door a couple of feet away from me on my bed. So when my boyfriend called me on his break, I told him about everything happening, and he tried to ease my mind by saying that I may just be tired of me seeing things that aren't there. Well, when I started agreeing that he may be right, I saw a huge handprint with what looked like long, pointy fingernails slowly sink into the memory foam mattress we had propped up against the wall in front of her bathroom. I freaked out. This thing was trapped me in my bedroom. The only way out was through a window that won't open or go through where that thing just showed me its hand was. I said goodbye to my boyfriend, grabbed my shoes, and ran through where the thing just was, booked it outside, and stayed outside for hours until my boyfriend came home. Could a haunted place itself be the one behind the paranormal activity? I live in a place that's very haunted. Place is old, witness to a bunch of deaths in it. I've done seances, experienced a lot of stuff, and felt and seen kind of familiar faces, you could say. However, these past few days I've been experiencing stuff out of the normal for this house. I've heard metal clanking on the door downstairs that leads to the street, as if someone was banging it. When I went to check, there was no one, and no traceable leftover energy or presence. I've heard noises in the kitchen, but the same thing happened. Yesterday, when I was getting ready for bed, 2:30ish a.m. if it's important, I turned the TV off after a late-night snack, went back to the living room to turn off my computer and the LED lights, and as I was heading upstairs to my room, the TV was turned back on. My aunt, who lives with me and gets up for work at this time, was already working in the bakery downstairs, so it wasn't her. Today, every time I went in the kitchen, I left the light on since we don't like having all the lights off at nighttime, and every time I went back for water or anything, the light was off. I purposely remembered leaving it on the last time so I wouldn't think, did I turn that off on accident? And when my aunt woke up, went to have breakfast, it was off again. My headset was also turned off a few times on its own. So I have my LED lights, but I haven't felt or seen anything or anything close. Could this be the house itself? What should I do? I feel like there's a powerful entity in my home attacking me. When the house I live in went up for sale over 8 years ago, we were informed that the previous owner had died in the medical room in his home, which is now my bedroom, and his wife died 14 hours later in our bathroom. They were both older people and their family had already prepared, and the house was sold a month after their death. A year after we moved into the house, shit started to go down. My grandfather had passed away, my friend had passed away, my dog had passed away, and my uncle passes away on or near our home. Now, I didn't really see the coronation of the deaths until I had my first contact with the dead. In 2018, when I was 10, I saw a light flickering, and I asked into the air, "If anyone or anything is present, make yourself known." And one light bulb exploded from the fixture. As a 10-year-old girl, I was petrified and screamed out in fear, but my mom blamed it on cheap quality, and I was being dramatic, so I kind of forgot about it and tried to be normal. Then I went into my edgy tween years. When I was 12, I went online to use a Ouija board, and I never said goodbye, so I believe I kind of spenned a door. That's when my life continued to spiral. But this time the spiral was quicker. It felt like every week something bad happens. So I looked into witchcraft stuff, and I saged my room down, and the torture stopped until recently. This past month I've been seeing shadow people, but they were 3D. My life has spiraled down again. But this time this thing has gotten stronger, and has been showing up in my dreams and putting thoughts in my head. I just can't do it anymore. I've been pushed and scratched by this thing. Just last night I was pulled by my leg and had scratches all over. If I find photos or take photos, I'll include them later on, but I really need help on what to do. I can't ask my mom or dad for help. They don't believe me in this. The only person keeping me going, my boyfriend, broke up with me, so I have no one to turn to and no one to help me. If you know what this thing is and know how to get rid of it, I'd be forever indebted to you. The thing I see in my dreams is a tall, 3-headed creature with a bull, man, and a goat or a ram head. So if you know what this is, please tell me. A scary memory, actually traumatizing for me. I was about 6 years old and my sister was about 7, living with my grandparents in Winter Park, Florida. It was around midnight, maybe early morning, but still dark enough to where your eyes had to adjust to your surroundings. My grandfather built a dog pen, what extended across the backyard with the opening contained by a fenced door. It opened up on the far end on the left side of the dog pen. Our bedroom window is on the right side of the house, in the back overlooking most of that side of the backyard. We had one adult female dog, and she had 4 baby puppies. At night, that's where they slept, also containing 2 dog houses my grandfather built for them. So one night the dogs were barking constantly. Usually that doesn't happen unless a small animal's out there and they can't get to it. But this night, I decided to look out for some stupid reason. I wanted to see what was going on. I guess my intuition told me these weren't normal barks. I peeked out my window to the right, nothing, then to the left. I can see what looks like a man, very charred or burned, because I can see his silhouette, but not his physique. And it looked like he was sitting in a red wagon. I know, sounds crazy. And he was opening the door to the dog pen, but it's as if he stopped soon as I peeked out of the window, like he sensed me. Getting goosebumps and shivers just typing this because I barely ever talk about this experience. I closed my window because I got spooked. I don't know how or why I got the courage to peek out again, but I did, and immediately looked to where I saw the man. But he wasn't there. I scanned the dog pen, and when my eyes got closer to the right side of it, the thing was right there by my window, so close to my window but still had no facial features, because he looked burned or charred. I couldn't do anything but stare, and his eyes were so red and he was frickin' smiling at me with white sharp teeth. I stared, couldn't blink for what seemed like 2 minutes. Of course, the scarier things are to us, the slower time gets. I snapped out of it, though. Woke my sister up to look out there with me, but it was gone. Next morning, one of the puppies were dead. His head was there, and the skin of his body was there, but his organs and his bones were gone. It was like someone carved everything out of him and just left his head and skin. My grandfather saw it, said it was a snake. Of course, I didn't believe that. What other explanation could it be other than an animal doing this? We buried him and cried. Suppressed that memory for 2 years and never looked out the window at night until I was about 22 years old. now 30. Pray to God I never see that thing again, but sometimes I can't help but feel it's there somewhere. I don't know, this is just my story. I made this account hoping to get some answers. Something. I can't be the only one.